This conversation is powered by Google Illuminate. Check out illuminate.google.com for more. Welcome to this discussion on Section 18 of the Federal Reserve Act, specifically focusing on the refunding bonds section. It's a fascinating piece of legislation with a rich history, and we're fortunate to have an expert here to unpack it for us. This section deals with a process that, while largely obsolete today, offers valuable insights into the early workings of the Federal Reserve System.
Indeed. Section 18, while no longer actively used, provides a window into the mechanics of monetary policy and bank regulation in the early 20th century. It reveals a system designed to manage the nation's currency and the stability of its banking system in a way that was quite innovative for its time.
This is striking how much the landscape has changed since its inception. Can you give us a sense of the context in which this section was written?
Absolutely. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 was a response to a series of financial panics that had plagued the United States. Section 18 specifically addressed the issue of circulating notes backed by government bonds, a system that needed careful management to ensure stability.
So this section wasn't just about refunding bonds, it was about managing the entire system of circulating notes. Let's dive into the specifics. The first part of Section 18 outlines the process for member banks to retire their circulating notes. Can you explain how that worked?
Essentially, member banks could apply to the Treasurer of the United States to sell, at par value, the government bonds that backed their circulating notes. This allowed banks to reduce their liabilities and adjust their reserves as needed. It was a mechanism for managing the money supply.
And this process was limited in time, correct?
Yes, the provision allowed for this process for a period of 20 years after the passage of the Act. This time limit reflects the evolving nature of financial systems and the need for flexibility in monetary policy.
The next part of Section 18 describes the role of the Federal Reserve banks in this process. How do they participate?
The Federal Reserve banks were given the discretion to purchase these bonds from member banks. This was a crucial aspect of the system, allowing the Federal Reserve to influence the money supply by controlling the amount of bonds in circulation. There was a limit, however, to prevent the Federal Reserve from becoming overly involved.
A $25 million annual limit, a significant sum back then, but a small fraction of today's financial markets. This highlights the scale of the financial system then compared to now. The allotment of bonds to individual Federal Reserve banks was based on a specific formula. Can you elaborate on that?
The allotment was proportional to each Federal Reserve bank's capital and surplus. This ensured a fair distribution of the bonds among the different regional banks, reflecting their relative size and importance within the system. This was a key element in maintaining a balanced approach to monetary policy across the country.
Once the bonds were purchased, what happened next?
The member bank would transfer the bonds to the purchasing Federal Reserve Bank, which would then deposit funds with the Treasurer of the United States. The Treasurer would then pay the member bank after deducting the amount needed to redeem the outstanding notes. The notes were then canceled, effectively removing them from circulation. This was a carefully designed process to ensure a smooth and orderly transition.
The Federal Reserve banks were then allowed to issue new circulating notes. How did this work in relation to the bonds?
The Federal Reserve banks could issue new notes equal to the par value of the bonds they had purchased. This maintained the overall level of currency in circulation while allowing for the retirement of older notes and the management of the bond portfolio. This was a key mechanism for maintaining the stability of the financial system.
Section 18 also details the requirements for the new notes issued by the Federal Reserve banks. What were some of the key stipulations?
The notes had to be backed by either direct obligations of the United States or other eligible assets. There were stipulations on the percentage of the value of those assets that could back the notes. The notes were also required to be in a specific form, receivable at par across the country, and redeemable in lawful money. These provisions ensured the integrity and value of the currency.
This section really emphasized the importance of maintaining the integrity and stability of the currency. Section 18 also included provisions for exchanging certain types of bonds. Can you explain this aspect?
Yes, Federal Reserve banks could exchange their 2% gold bonds without outstanding circulation for a combination of 1-year gold notes and 30-year 3% gold bonds. This allowed for the refinancing of debt and the management of the Federal Reserve's portfolio. It was a way to adjust the maturity structure of their holdings.
This demonstrates the flexibility built into the system to adapt to changing economic conditions. The Secretary of the Treasury played a significant role in these exchanges. What was their responsibility?
The Secretary of the Treasury was responsible for issuing the 1-year gold notes and the 30-year 3% gold bonds needed for the exchanges. This involved the creation and management of new debt instruments to facilitate the refinancing process. This highlights the close coordination between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve.
And there was a provision for a further exchange, wasn't there?
Yes, Federal Reserve banks could also exchange their 3% bonds for the 1-year gold notes. This provided additional flexibility in managing their portfolios and adapting to changing market conditions. This further emphasizes the dynamic nature of the system.
As you mentioned earlier, Section 18 is now largely obsolete. What led to its obsolescence?
The evolution of monetary policy and the development of new financial instruments rendered many of the provisions in Section 18 unnecessary. The system of circulating notes backed by government bonds was largely replaced by other mechanisms for managing the money supply. The changes in the financial system made the specific mechanisms outlined in Section 18 less relevant.
So, while no longer active, its historical significance remains. What are some of the key takeaways from studying Section 18, even though it's no longer in active use?
It highlights the importance of flexibility and adaptability in monetary policy. The system was designed to respond to changing economic conditions and to manage the money supply effectively. It also shows the close coordination between the Federal Reserve and the Treasury in managing the nation's finances. Finally, it underscores the evolution of financial systems and the need for continuous adaptation to new circumstances.
It's a testament to the dynamic nature of financial systems and the need for continuous adaptation. So, in essence, Section 18, while obsolete, provides a valuable case study in the evolution of monetary policy and the challenges of managing a complex financial system. It's a reminder that even seemingly outdated legislation can offer crucial insights into the historical context and development of modern financial practices.
Precisely. It's a fascinating glimpse into the early days of the Federal Reserve and the innovative solutions employed to address the challenges of the time.
That was a great discussion. Thank you for your insights.